I became a lawyer in the early 90s, and in the mid 90s, I became a corporate lawyer.
Right.
I became a lawyer in 91, but
Wow.
before liberalization.
Right, bang on time.
So bang on time. So just a few months after I became a lawyer, there was liberalization.
Tell us about your book. Tell me first, why did you want to write it?
If the economy grows, you grow, and therefore you start thinking in terms of solutions. So part of it was my sense for what is not working in India. This is how the system is. I'd be foolish not to exploit it. So I am going to use delay in the process as leverage. So bribery and corruption, for most Indian businesses, you treat it as a resource. It's a cost. And it doesn't typically stop you from doing stuff, which is why we have a very large economy despite the... So a lot of my thinking is outside that kind of an obstacle.
I think some of the ideas are very powerful. Some I disagree with.
I mean, I lean back on Modi ji's pakoda wala example, because a pakoda wala selling pakodas on a thela, in most states in India, you will take a minimum of 4 to 6 approvals, permits, licenses to set up something like this.
Yeah.
How will I even know? When I come from that background, am I even capable of knowing that I'm going to be... I think I'm doing an honest job, whereas on day one, I'm doing illegality.
Hello everyone, we're privileged to have Anand Prasad, one of the founders of Trilegal, India's only professional law firm, here with us today. Welcome, Anand.
Thank you, Rahul. I must say that all law firms are professional.
Fair enough. This is how Trilegal advertises, quote unquote, itself. As your book taught me, you can't advertise in the law profession. But anyway, so I'll start, Anand, by asking a question that I ask all our guests. When in your life, in your career, did you first notice this thing called economic growth? What did you notice about it? What have your thoughts been? What have your emotions attached to growth been? Tell us about it.
It was sometime in the mid 90s that I became a lawyer in the early 90s. And in the mid 90s, I became a corporate lawyer. And as a corporate lawyer, in the first couple of years, I started doing a fair bit of work in those days, the power and energy sector that was doing very well. A lot of investment was coming in there. Lots of other stuff was happening as well, but power and energy specifically. And then the energy sector started failing. The thing was, why is it failing? And at least my realization was it is failing because customers are unable to pay. Whether they were farms were getting free electricity, which they continue to get now. But generally, customers needed subsidy. And the question was, what is it that will actually cause the electricity sector to come back? And that's the first time in my life when I started sort of linking things back into the general economy. And it became clearer to me that the agricultural sector needs to do much better for energy to be sustainable in a financial independent fashion by itself.
Right.
And so that then brought to me, it's not just agriculture, but it's actually rural economy. And it sort of took me into various places since then. So that's been the first time that I actually started
thinking about
through this connection process, started thinking in terms of...
It's interesting to me, the corporate law thing as a profession itself, was it not also burgeoning or even existing largely because of the 91 reforms?
It did. Actually, there was very little corporate law before that. Everybody that became a lawyer before the liberalization,
right.
I became a lawyer in 91. But before liberalization...
Right, bang on time.
So bang on time. So just a few months after I became a lawyer, there was liberalization. But before that, there were a few very small practices in Bombay that used to call themselves corporate lawyers. I used to work in a firm called Decolonizing company, which was considered a corporate firm.
Right.
But essentially, they did a lot of indirect tax, a lot of company law litigation. And we used to think that is corporate law. So I used to think of myself as a corporate lawyer until the time I started doing commercial corporate law or transactional law. And I realized that there was a world of difference.
Right.
The big difference in lawyering terms, just as a profession, was to sort of understand that this is litigation or dispute resolution in a commercial setting. This is how do you apply the law to run business. And these are completely different professions, though we are similarly educated, but these are very, very different professions. So here, as a commercial lawyer, the better commercial lawyers understand business. They're thinking business in the context of a legal framework, whereas the others are just sort of dealing with disputes.
Right.
So the better corporate lawyers are the ones that are actually thinking business in the context of law, and not people who are, they're also corporate lawyers that are just going through
Give
the
me
motions.
examples where I can understand it. Like this is...
So let's say, I'll give you a simple example.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so let's say that there is a very simple example. Let's say there's a lease deed to be done. Now, a typical lawyer will say that the commercials have to be agreed by my client.
Right.
I will draft the document based on the commercials.
Right.
Now, what do I mean by commercials? Commercials, I mean by saying that X is the rental. Annually or biannually, the rental will go up by so much percentage. Security deposit must be X. What are the other terms and conditions of the lease?
Right.
So this is what the client will tell a typical lawyer, and you will sort of put it around it. The commercial lawyer will think, is this good rental in the market? So he or she should understand the market.
Right.
What are the rentals over here? Is my client paying too much? Are you getting a good deal? You know this not because you're doing statistical information gathering, but actually anecdotal, because you're actually doing a lot of that sort of work.
Right.
So market intelligence is on account of the practice that you do.
Maybe including payment terms, how much
Payment terms, whether you should do advance monthly rent later.
Yeah.
Suddenly somebody is asking 20% increase. You say, no, but everybody else is asking 5 or 10%. So you will also get advice to your client on what should be the increment.
Got it.
You will give your client, suppose somebody says, you give me 3 years security deposit. You'll say, no. 3 years security deposit means that you're losing so much interest.
Right.
That loss of interest, you count it as part of your rental. You see how much you're losing.
Right.
Market condition is you will get 6 months security deposit. So that is what, so the commercial lawyer knows market conditions, is thinking of the real cost to you.
Right.
So when you say, give me a large security deposit, I am also thinking, what is the interest that you're losing? Because it's interest-free security deposit. I'm adding it onto your rent and saying, actually, you think X is your rent, but your rent is actually X plus the interest cost.
Right.
So commercial lawyers think differently. There are some dispute lawyers that do some of this, but the principal job of the commercial lawyer is to also know the commerce in which you are. Now you can take this, and this is a simple example.
Of course.
On an acquisition deal or on a restructuring deal.
Or a power purchase agreement.
A power purchase agreement. How do you work it? Power purchase agreement, or I used to be an LNG lawyer at one time.
Achha.
How does it work in the gas? What is happening around the world? What sort of deals are getting struck? What are the sort of contractual conditions that exist around the world?
Right.
Now, this is how part of the trick is how do you gather that data?
Yeah.
And how do you sort of build it into your know-how?
And completely unsurprising that this did not exist before 1991.
It did not exist. I mean, even now I would say that we are much evolved. In the early days of my being a commercial lawyer, we used to do very simple stuff. There were international firms that we do the more sort of sophisticated. We used to think sophisticated. Those included shareholder agreement, share purchase agreements, power purchase agreements. We would do the local law support.
Right.
Today, Indian firms can do a lot of what used to be done by the international firms. They have now, by and large, become irrelevant, other than in very certain specific circumstances. So, Indian lawyers are today become sophisticated enough to do, shareholder agreements is considered very easy by most, or joint venture agreements very easy. You now do more sophisticated acquisition agreements, private equity, you do listings, you do a whole host of more sophisticated stuff. Having said that, there is a lot of international commercial practices that exist. How people develop commerce, how is it that they do more sophisticated commerce, stock markets, derivatives, etc. That is something that is yet to come to India. It's because our regulation doesn't allow some of that stuff.
Right.
So, for example, I'll give you a simple example. It's now beginning to come. It's going to come in a few months' time. You could not take a bank loan to buy a company. or shares of a company. It is prohibited, whereas internationally you could do it. So you call it leveraged buyouts.
Right. Yeah.
You are now, regulation now allowed it in a few months' time or a year's time, it will now become, and then that will begin to grow in sophistication. So that is something that Indian lawyers don't have so much of experience with.
Right.
Because there as the bank's lawyers, you will now have to start thinking in terms of, is this acquisition deal going to work out? So think in terms of a lender's lawyer.
Yeah.
Lender's lawyer is not only doing documentation, is also thinking, is this guy going to be capable of paying back the loan in that sort of time frame? So you do a diligence, and part of a diligence is that.
So, you know, what you're saying, and I know we're here to discuss your book, but it's such an interesting topic in general. What really you're alluding to is how capacity develops in an ecosystem over time.
Yes.
The first thing you have to do is allow activity.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And in India, and I think one area that we actually, and it's completely off topic, but I'll quickly mention it and move on. One area where we really suffer from this chicken and egg problem is local body governance, right? Whenever people say that urban local bodies and rural local bodies should have more powers, the stock response always is there's no capacity there. Nobody can actually do anything. What will you do if you give them the power? I think this entire parable that you just told us about, right? How the Indian legal profession has gone from strength to strength once the need came up is a fantastic beginning to our conversation. Thank you.
No.
So now tell us about your book. Tell me first, why did you want to write it? What was the motivation?
So there were two drivers. One, as a commercial lawyer, I was since the mid-90s a commercial lawyer until 2017, which is when I left the legal profession for a couple of years. I'll also describe that. So as a commercial lawyer, I could see how, and exactly using similar sort of techniques, understand how the world of commerce works. There are lots of commercial lawyers that understand that. What are the things that are causing commerce to fail? What are things that are causing the economy to stall? So in fair measures, while without statistics, but I can speak like an economist. While I have no training in
Most
economics. In economics. So I think without the statistics.
Sure.
But in terms of just understanding how business works, many commercial lawyers can speak in a fairly sophisticated manner. So I and therefore you start thinking in terms of what stops business? What are the obstacles? And you're not only thinking just textbook law, you're also thinking how is the law working in the real world? What are the real world issues that are causing challenges? I mean, just like the example that I gave you, why is the power sector failing? Because the market is unable to pay it market rates. Right. So it requires state subsidy or it requires state support. What are the solutions for it? And then you come about with various solutions. You look at it internationally, whether there should be competition, whether how much of regulation should be there, how much of regulated tariff, or should it be competing tariffs, and you look at stuff like that. You start then thinking in terms of, because you know that you are basically a support function for the economy. If the economy grows, you grow with it. And so therefore, every time a business is challenged, you feel challenged. And therefore, you start thinking in terms of solutions. So part of it was my sense for what is not working in India. And for a very long time, I have held one belief, and then that sort of developed into the book, was that there was no sanctity of contract. So sometime in my time at Trilegal, I had a promoter, we were negotiating. It is a large telecom sort of thing, where the Indian promoter told me that you're negotiating too much. Why don't you do one thing? Take this blank sheet of paper. I'll sign it wherever you want me to sign. You write whatever contract you want on top of it. We will then negotiate when you come for enforcement. And it made it so clear that written contracts are by and large meaningless for somebody who has that approach to written contracts. And then I've seen it over time. I've seen lots of people do it like that. You'll negotiate a contract, you'll sign very little, you'll negotiate very little, and then you'll renegotiate at a later point in time.
Right.
That confidence that you have, that I can renegotiate, it is a confidence that most people in the Western developed economies don't have. they actually think of contracts in a far more sacrosanct manner than Indians do. I'm talking about very large, the largest of Indian companies think exactly like I'm describing. Now, it's not, I also came to the realization that it is not because those Indian companies or their professionals or promoters are dishonest. This is how the system is. I'd be foolish not to exploit it. Whatever it allows me to do, I will do it in the furtherance of my business. So I am going to use delay in the process as leverage. I am going to use it as one of the resources to actually further my economic interest. And you will do that in many ways. So one understanding that I had quite early was to look at a contract and look at the value of the contract. And then when you're drafting contracts and you're negotiating contracts, you're thinking of all these things that are not just what the written word is, but it is also what is outside. And therefore, if you want, and what this does, is it slows down the speed of the economy. Because it takes much longer to do deals. I've had clients who have told me that it's in India, it's a lot harder to do a $20 million deal, whereas in North America, you can do a $200 million deal in a 2-week period.
I want to expand on that, right? I think this story is so chilling, right? This idea that contracts are so worthless that people will tell you, I don't care what's written, you write it, right? Speed is one thing, but the willingness to enter into a contract, when you know that, and over time people discover, right, that it's not going to be honored, that you have these additional points of leverage further down. Some people will slow down the process. Some people will exit it altogether. You will say, I don't want to enter into a contract in India with Indian entities because I know that it is worthless.
So some people would have that view, but the attractiveness of the Indian market. Now you start getting these statistics like, look at the size of the Indian market, 1.5 billion people. 1% of 1.5 billion is how much? So then you'll start doing these numbers. Then this will look much larger than anything that you can do in Europe or the US. It is so difficult as a market to look away from.
Yeah, but this used to be true, but it's not anymore. If you look at, for instance, FDI today, it has cratered. Net FDI is actually, I think, zero.
But you also look at, it's not only in FDI terms, you look at Indians. It is my belief that if you actually make it easier for small people, little people to do businesses, there is not so much need for FDI. We don't need to think in terms of large companies. Just allow the chota panwala to be able to set up 20 shops in 2 years' time. He is for the last 20 years just sitting with one shop. That is the nature of our system. And that's where when the guy can set up 20 pan shops.
Example. The guy who does not have leverage is the guy who will not be able to take advantage of the system.
Absolutely.
It's either the foreign guy or the small guy. Both of these people, the big Indian guys are the ones.
So now why does the economy still work despite all of this? It is, I will write something in a contract. It's not as if it is worthless in that sense. Everybody that signs a contract knows that in 4-5 years' time it will get enforced. The question is the time value of money. How long are you willing to be stuck for that money that you'll get at the end of it? And therefore, midway, I will negotiate with you. And you'll say, forget it. Bhagte hue chor ki langoti sahi. Whatever I get today is better than what I'll get after 4 years. So you'll just grab what you get today. So it allows me to renegotiate terms. Why, therefore, it does work in certain circumstances is, in the Indian context, there's a lot of business that also happens in India on a handshake basis. There is hardly any written contract there. So it is in terms of personal credibility. So it's my credibility at stake. Now, I will play that game with somebody else in whom I have that credibility, or who has that credibility. But some stranger where we don't know, we will not do that. And therefore, what works when you think in terms of credibility is, credibility becomes a relevant criteria when I've got ongoing business. So the reason why I will comply today is not the fear of the law, not fear of the contract.
It's the next
because I want to set up a relationship with you, because for the next 10 years, having a good relationship with you will mean that it will serve my economic interest. So Today, I might be willing to pay even if it pinches me because I am now laying the ground for 20 years.
Right.
But as soon as I know that if you exit, there are another 10 guys lining up before me to sort of do deals with me, I'll treat you badly. Because the contract then in those circumstances has very little value or weight. So that was one sort of
sanctity of contract, and
sanctity of contract and what comes out of there. Right. So it's speed at which business is done,
number of
the confidence levels.
Absolutely.
It restricts the economy.
Absolutely.
And it's got various other elements that go with it. Along with speed, you also have a realization of how regulation works. And I won't get into bribery and corruption. So bribery and corruption, for most Indian businesses, you treat it as a resource. It's a cost. And it doesn't typically stop you from doing stuff. Which is why you have a very large economy despite So a lot of my thinking is outside that kind of an obstacle. So what is it then impedes you? Then there are lots of regulation that generally slows down the process. So even bribery and corruption can't get things done.
Right.
So for example, you'll get examples saying, in China, I have to pay one guy and my job is done. I'm willing to pay that one guy. In India, every 6 months, a new guy shows up wanting more money. So it's an endless queue of people wanting to rent seek from me. There are 20 guys who have the ability to kill your business.
Correct.
In China or in Indonesia, there's only one guy that will kill your business. So you just deal with that one guy, you're done. And in India, other than the 20 guys, there are the courts, which in a PIL will do something to you.
The best joke I've heard on this topic is a guy comes to an Indian agent saying, "Mera kaam karwa do." The agent says, "Sir, I cannot guarantee you कि मैं आपका काम करवा दूंगा. I can guarantee you कि मैं आपके competitor का काम रुकवा दूंगा."
So absolutely. So that is, injunctions are very easy to get.
Yes.
We talk about terrible Indian courts or how they are slow. But just take it from me, it is so easy to stop somebody from doing something. You get an injunction, very easy. In a day's notice, you can get one.
Right.
So that was one part of the problem, is that the impact that this had in terms of just how it operationally impacts business. There were lots of I know of international clients that there have been strong voices within those corporate groups against doing business in India. On the basis that actually nobody can do any business in India, you have to pay somebody a bribe. Whether it's small bribe, big bribe, etc., you call it acceleration payments, you call it facilitation payments, etc. And for them, the fear, it's not as if they're very honest guys. It is one that they have got far greater or better enforcement in their countries, and they have got some sort of form of Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So their board or their senior management goes to jail if some bribery happens over here. And so therefore, there's a great degree of reluctance for people who have had some experience in India to actually come back to India. It's only when you're very greedy, you say, this is a market that I can't ignore, and therefore I'll get in and I'll pretend that this is not happening and look the other way. That is principally what drives, that's how our market is working. Everybody says everything is kosher, but actually underlying it is kosher because it is market standard to operate in this fashion. So how do you keep bribery and corruption aside? I'm not saying, I won't get into that in any, there are possible no solutions to it. But there are solutions for a whole host of other things. And therefore, how can the law be fixed? What is it that you can change at a slightly macro level? The other was my experience after I left Trilegal for 2 years. I tried to set up a sort of classical liberal party, which is a free market oriented and an individual liberty oriented political party. So I ran around for 2 years, did grassroots politics, and I ran into people's problems where they were constantly, deals were being subverted. These are small 30,000, 40,000 rupees where you were not getting paid on time. I see it. I pretend to be a musician part-time in my life. And I see so many musicians saying कि मेरे से यहाँ गाना ना गवा लेते, पैसे नहीं देते. Now, if you're getting paid 20,000 or 30,000 rupees a gig, somebody decides that they will pay you only half of it. In theory, you can go to court. Can you really go to court? The answer is no.
Yeah.
Because a lawyer is going to cost you much more.
Right.
The time that it will take you will cost you much more.
It's not worth
if you're seen to be a litigating guy, the next guy will not get you a job. So, the other reality in this 2-year period is my experience for seeing how the common man also gets impacted, where you're constantly subverted. I mean, the people are constantly underpaid, false promises. You see it when we buy things, and you look at some advertisement, you go and buy something, you get something else. There's very little recourse. We've set up these consumer courts, but it takes 4, 5 years, 10 years to get anything done. So it is basically a dysfunctional system, and the book principally is about, it's not about how do I reframe the laws. It is principally about how do I improve the speed of enforcement. It is on the basis that India has enough and more laws. We actually need lesser laws. How do you give effect to it? I'll give you an example. We have got something called the Indian Penal Code, or now the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita.
Yeah.
So you've got criminal law, which has been around for a very long time. But various new laws come up where again you impose criminal liability. You will see that there's an overlap.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing. Why is there a need to in the new law have criminal liability? Because this is not working. So you try and create a special law. Now think of it like this. Our propensity is to create law. It's easier to legislate in parliament.
Right.
It is very hard to enforce this.
Right.
So when the special law gets created, first few years, you'll find it becomes faster. Then it falls into the same malice as the old criminal law. Everything becomes slow. I'll give you another example. So our reaction to when the Nirbhaya rape case was there was to ask for death penalty for rapists.
Right.
Our system is unable to punish people for a 10-year term. Yeah. Remember one thing, death requires far more stringent evidence.
Yes.
You really have to view it as a rarest of the rare. It is going to be so much harder to get death. And if you can't get death, you could get acquittal. But our reaction, and everybody was happy with it, that aaj se rapist ko death penalty milna chahiye. It didn't happen. I mean, they enhanced the sentence. They made it life or something like that. But a reaction is the low-hanging fruit कि parliament में legislate कर दो, नया law बना दो, public खुश हो जाएगी. On the ground, nothing changes.
Yeah.
So the idea of the book was, with very little, you can actually do a lot for enforcement. And my experience internationally, because also Trilegal did a lot of work internationally, as well as we had a relationship with a magic circle firm from London called Alan Overy. So also that experience, because we were sort of almost part of that network, is that how does it work in various places around the world? How do you use technology in a particular fashion? How do contracts work in certain jurisdictions? How do various things work? So it was sort of imagining some basic, easy steps, low-hanging fruit that can radically transform the business environment at least.
Right. So I've been through the book. It's a very thought-provoking book, very wide-ranging. I think some of the ideas are very powerful, some I disagree with, but we can get into that. Before that, how do you classify the different parts of your book? How do you give a Cliff Notes version to people who haven't read it?
So I would say the book is split in 5 chapters, and it's progressively in that, so it's coming from an enforcement perspective. So use technology in courts, various parts of technology. The technology chapter will have almost no opposition politically. There will be some retired judges, some present judges that will be critical of some things, but basically bogus. In a country of 1.5 billion people, there will always be people to disagree. So you accept disagreement, you don't need to fight it. Just see whether it's going to benefit a vast majority of people, and if it is going to, you just deploy the technology.
Right.
Technology deployment is a function of state providing resource. And if you look at how do I speed up process in court, you will find most people say we need more judges, we need more courtrooms. It's 2 basic concepts. Third is just withdraw a whole set of cases. So just reduce the burden. Now I'll tell you what's the problem with the first 2. More judges, you look at the quality of professionals that we have now. So what do you mean by more judges? Are you saying that substandard judges? You even today have a whole host of people that are not people that you admire.
Are you trying to avoid contempt of court here?
So I'm saying you don't admire.
Good.
So when you now think in terms of you make that 5 times, what's going to happen to the quality of justice delivery? The second is physical courtrooms require a lot of money. Just the infrastructure, just creating infrastructure takes a lot of money. Also salaries, HR costs for all these people. Deploying technology is so much more cheaper. You can actually, why people set up BPOs? What is true for other businesses is also true for this. If you think of judicial justice delivery as a service that the state provides to the people, the same principles that apply for any business which is of huge volume will apply here. You can deploy technology, do various things with it, do it at a significantly cheaper fashion. You don't have to go down the 18th century route of having individuals and having physical courtrooms. So I would say that yes, there would be some conservative voices that would not like the idea of so much technology, partly also because many of us are not so comfortable with new technology. So the old thing is good. It should have very little political opposition. It can radically transform. Just the technology chapter can radically transform what happens, speed at which justice happens. It is for disputes that take, for many kinds of disputes that take 4-5 years to get done. You can get done in 8 to 12 weeks. So we are talking weeks, we are not talking 1 or 2 years. You can get done so quickly. Now imagine the guy who's wanting to breach a contract, like I was describing. He now safely thinks that he's got 4 years to deal with it. If that 4 years becomes 8 weeks, now my enthusiasm to breach is not going to be so much. So that's one part of the story. So non-contentious, I would say easy politically, it'll have very little opposition.
Right.
One of the things that also we need to take into account when we are thinking technology and when we are thinking speed is when the system starts delivering much better performance in terms of the speed at which it delivers, the number of people coming to court will also go up. So today, think of the number of injustices that each one of us in this room suffers, which we say, forget it, let me just follow that injustice and move on in life. It's because we don't have the energy to deal with a protracted court process and then spend money on it. But if this now becomes a 4, 6, 8 week thing, then every time we'll run. So the volume will go up. So every time your justice delivery improves, the volume is going to go up. So you need to have a significantly scalable model. And only technology can do that. The number of judges simply can't do it. You will need some basic judges. You'll need various administrative processes. My book doesn't deal with those administrative processes, just deals with technology. But there are a bunch of things that you can do to actually make this happen. So that is first chapter. Second chapter is principally about sanctity of contract. So when you look at any public discourse, anybody talking, any lawyer talking, any judge talking, any economist talking, anybody policy person talking, they will tell you sanctity of contracts is a major obstacle for the economy.
Yeah.
And when you say sanctity of contract, they say justice needs to be delivered much faster. It needs to be higher quality. All that my technology chapter deals with. What almost nobody talks about and what I see which exists in the Western world is the cost of default. So if you're going to default, the consequence is going to be very expensive for you. So if you breach a contract anywhere in the developed world, the level of damages that you get hit with is massive. The reason why, you think in terms of the Erin Brockovich or lots of the other, that's not contract, that's tort law, but you look at the consequence for US companies, they just clean up their act. So a lot of compliance happens because of fear that the damages that will get hit are huge. Other thing that fear of damages, large damages is, I am more than happy to settle through mediation. So mediation will begin to work. Today mediation will not work because everybody you're going through a process, but nobody intends for it to actually work in the commercial circumstance.
Right.
One party might be wanting it to work, the other doesn't want it to work. But it is a fear of massive damages that will make it work. So the other is to change a law of damages because we are today on the base of reasonable damages, compensatory in nature. And it is direct loss, not indirect loss. If you look at penal damages, the basic statute has language of that nature, but case law has diluted it. It's sort of brought down 1950s, 60s, 70s case law that's made it sort of small because we're a poor country. The question was, assumption, our economy was not sophisticated. Most of the disputes dealt with farmers and poor people. When breaches happen, those were because you could not control it. Today, now breach of a contract has become a resource. I'll use it as part of furthering my profitability. Today, the environment has changed. You need to now relook at the law. You need to make breach an expensive proposition. And in my book, I gave an example, is that when suppose I have to give you 100 crores.
Right.
I decide I have to give Rahul 100 crores. मैं नहीं देता. So I know that I have to give it to you. I'll tell you also in private, Rahul, I know I have to give you 100 crores, but मैं नहीं दे रहा हूँ. You go to court. This happens very often in the business world. You do encounter these. You go to court. The other side will tell you go to court.
Yeah.
You go to court. It's a 3-4 year process. At the end of it, I know that I'll have to pay you the 100 crores and I'll have to pay you. Court will give me a 6, 7, 8% interest.
Right.
Now think in terms of what has happened. Money that I should have paid you on day one, I have not paid you. That means it's like a loan that you have given me for a 4-year period.
Right.
The interest cost is
Probably
6, 7,
higher.
8%.
Yeah.
If I had gone and borrowed in the market, it was 14, 15, 16%.
Right.
It is cheaper to actually do this at a small cost for whatever the legal process takes. On top of it, I also have the possibility that after 2 years, Rahul would have spent money on lawyers. Thak gaya hoga, you feel victimized. I said, Rahul, why don't you do one thing? Let's just settle it. 100 crore देने थे ना, मैं तुमको 90 दे देता हूँ, कहानी खत्म करते हैं.
Right.
And Rahul will say, forget it, yeah, just get whatever I can, because you are looking at time cost of money. So if you, that 90 crores for you in another 2 years will be 200 crores. Whereas if you start waiting out that dispute, you will only get 100 crores plus 6-7% interest.
Right.
So you will take the 90 today. I also know that you will do that. So unless you are at a personal level angered by me, you will actually settle. So I work with these parameters in mind so I say that actually it should not be, if I have to give you 100 crores and I do something like this, I should be required at the end of 4 years to give 300 crores.
Right.
Now suddenly it's no longer profitable for me to delay you payment. So I'll say it is better for me to borrow from a bank at 15% and pay off Rahul. That's the other element that almost never gets spoken of. So I sort of partly technology and sanctity of contracts in terms of imposing much heavier burden for breaches.
So what needs to change for this heavier burden to be imposed?
Small changes to the Contract Act. So you just override previous case law and you have 1 or 2 more sentences added to section 73 and 74 maybe of the Indian Contract Act and you would have gotten it.
Okay.
And you need the first 1 or 2 judges to pass judgments like that, that's done.
Got it.
There will be fear. Now you look at this sort of reticence when we have in our entire process. And then I sort of looked at various other things. Why are other laws failing? So you look at the IBC. I mean, the IBC is major reform. You restructure companies. If you can't pay, you're gone bankrupt. So your equities become zero. You are now owned by the lender.
Right.
So it is now a lender company is the thought process and therefore you restructure it. Restructuring works if you can achieve it within small definite time periods.
Right.
If I can make it an endless journey, then it doesn't work so well. For the lender, who in terms of recovery. Now, what happens in our system is, and this is the malaise that we have sort of been living with. Again, small changes needed. So there are a bunch of things, but I talk in terms of the IBC also, is that why does our law says in 180 days you need to restructure, or you have an additional 90 days that you can get. So that's the 270 days you should be done.
Right.
There's so many restructuring that are going for 3-4 years. Now the reason for that is our judges are very fearful of how long it will, because when restructuring fails, you should go to liquidation. We have this fear of liquidation. So we think what will happen in liquidation. Now, again, socialist mindset, you think in terms of what happens in liquidation. Let's say this house has to be liquidated.
Right.
There are 2 ways of looking at it. One, I'll break up the house, sell all the stone, the floor, the concrete, the whatever I pull down, I'll pull it out and sell the land. The other way of looking at liquidation from a financial perspective is just sell the house. I don't need to tear down the house.
Right.
I can just sell the house. Our judicial mindset is you will tear down the house and you'll sell it brick by brick. And you'll get very little. It'll also take very long to do this. The other way of looking at liquidation, just sell the house completely. That awareness is not so much. That liquidation is also possible where you preserve the value of the asset. It just gets a new owner. So if there's a factory, you're thinking, oh, so many workers will lose their jobs. Then no, why will workers lose their jobs? Sell it as a going concern. There'll be a new owner. It's just that the old owner who is basically a lousy business person who's defaulted on his debt,
Right.
or maybe he's not a lousy person, he's run into bad luck. But the truth about entrepreneurship is it is not meant to ring fence either your incompetence or your bad luck.
Right.
Luck can both take you up and can take you down. It should not be the job of the state or law to protect you from bad luck.
Right.
Beyond a point. I mean, little bit it can give you some protection, but luck is a part of entrepreneurship. So so these are the kind of fears that come from the sort of old which we continue to have. Also, and therefore I suggest that if you want to make the IBC more functional, focus on how you can get liquidation done. Increase the confidence in liquidation so that you can actually start restructuring quickly. Because then courts will not be that. See, even the courts want it to happen quickly.
Right.
It is just that the volume is so high. Also, for many of them, the expertise is not there. So the lack of expertise makes you tentative because you don't want to pass judicial orders which you don't fully understand. What will its outcome be? So you have made civil judges who have done some company litigation sort of sit as they're just not up to the task. We have got insolvency professionals, all sorts of people give an exam and become insolvency professionals. Insolvency professional's job is to take over the management of the company. So when a company is admitted for liquidation or for insolvency, the old board has to go away and new management is the insolvency professional. Think of a 5,000 crore company. Do you think they are, even if I'm a partner in a big four, am I capable of running a company? Do I have any experience? Suddenly out of nowhere I come, I pass a test and I'm supposed to be running a 5,000 crore business. If it takes 2 years to run it, basically what happens to the asset?
Right.
So these are things that have not been thought of. And a lot of we tend to sort of outsource some of our thinking. So we tend to, in the US this happens, in Europe this happens. Our ground realities are different. There people are a little more, they're having a free market for so long that they are professionals that understand a lot of this. Our free market has not been around for so long. We don't have professionals. We don't have our entire national enterprise is not built in a manner that we can actually do it like that. So when we legislate, we don't take into account things like this. Again, with small changes to the IBC, you can do these fixes. How do you sort of look at insolvency professionals? How do you look at management? Take a more realistic view. If the insolvency professional can't do it, should you be displacing the old management entirely, or should you allow for some degree of continuity? Because they are the ones who know how the business works. This poor fellow doesn't even know. I'm just an accountant. So those are the kinds of, there's a reality check that is needed that needs to get sort of built into some of these laws. So those are the two kinds of things. There's one other I talk in terms of whistleblower legislation. Right. So there is so much of corporate fraud that happens in India. It's very hard for third-party regulators or investigators to find fraud.
Right.
The easiest way is to get internal people to blow a whistle.
Yes.
Why will an internal person blow a whistle? Because one, there's a threat, somebody will sort of get me beaten up or something like that. Also, once I blow a whistle, I'll not get another job.
Right.
So I suggest taking the US route, that if I blow a whistle and you can actually procure a conviction or impose a penalty, you give me a big chunk of money. So I can, having blown the whistle, I can retire.
Right. Some percentage of the fraud.
Some percentage of the fraud comes to me.
Yeah.
You will find a lot of whistleblowing happening.
Yeah.
When you talk in terms of a lot of corporate fraud, it doesn't get done only by one person. You will have an old school promoter who then uses professional managers to do it.
The CAs will know.
Or the professional managers. I mean, the professional manager will tell you, I've been in situations. What do I do? My boss told me, email hai mere paas, instructing me to do this. I am in no position to tell him no, because he'll sack me. He'll get somebody else. The truth of our market is we are not in a position to get sacked.
Right.
We know that we are doing something that is wrong. That's the kind of professional that you'll tap into when you talk in terms of a functional whistleblower legislation.
Right.
So those are the kind of things that I sort of suggested. These are not huge big ticket reforms. This is not about transforming, decolonizing in that fashion. So these two sets of commercial law reform and technology are relatively low hanging fruit. It'll have some degree of, there'll always be, as I said, some opposition, but it'll transform India.
Right.
Then I've got 3 chapters that are slightly more trickier, that have a degree of politics involved with it. So you could put it in the category of decolonization. I don't think of it as decolonization, but I think in terms of, when I think decolonization, I'm not saying that the white guy is bad or our former rulers were bad. I'm saying that how should a country frame its laws? Around in democracies, the basic principle is that laws must come from the people. The people must understand it. Their representatives frame the law. How much of the laws do our people understand? So we have our representatives, some of them, most of them don't understand. In today's, the parliamentarians don't understand law. Some people that understand it import it from somewhere else, whether it is something that has come from the past or it's new imports. You then explain it a little bit and people implement it. But your population doesn't understand it at all. At all means at all.
Yeah.
Is that what the essence of democracy should be? So when I say decolonizing the laws, I'm talking in terms of look at how does your population understand specific kinds of laws. And I'm talking business laws in this. How does it look at laws and revisit your laws in that context? So for example, if there is I lean back on Modi ji's pakoda wala example, but it's a great example because a pakoda wala selling pakodas on a thela is principal example of somebody that comes from an economically weaker section of society, has very little finance, has an entrepreneurial zeal, comes and sets up, thinks he is doing an honest piece of work. Think in terms of his educational background and his economic background.
Right.
In most states in India, you will take a minimum of 4 to 6 approvals, permits, licenses to set up something like this.
Yeah.
How will I even know? When I come from that background, am I even capable of knowing that I think I'm doing an honest job, whereas on day one, I'm doing illegality.
Yeah.
So I'm also prone to extortion. That's why my one pan shop remains one pan shop. My one thela remains one thela only.
Absolutely.
I cannot look to develop 10 thelas.
Absolutely.
So that is and I'm putting it in the sense of, is that law which requires those 4 or 6 permits and licenses, is it coming from the people that are setting up, from the category of people, the large population that exists in India that votes for the law? They don't understand it. This is an import that you've got from somewhere else, that I need this license, I need this fire safety, I need this. It may be a good thing for them, but do they understand it is the question. Therefore, in a democracy, should the law be reflective of the mindset or the thinking of the people? And that is my approach when I come to decolonization. So I use it in various contexts in terms of, partly it is the job of the state to educate the people on a constant basis, to facilitate compliance, to reduce the burden of compliance. So if you see somebody at Thelawala who is selling pakodas, you don't suddenly go and extort him. It should be an obligation to one, tell him what all is needed to comply, educate him, give him a few chances to clean up his act, and then you take whatever adverse action. On day one, don't treat him like a criminal.
Right.
He's not thinking of himself as a criminal. If I were to think of myself as a criminal while setting up a thela, I may as well get into robbing somebody or some theft or something. It's more economically productive.
Right.
And there's the risk that I'll get caught, but it's economically I'll make more money doing that, or I'll do drug peddling. But I am not wanting to do that. I'm wanting to do an honest person's job. But the way you have actually framed it, because the law has not come from people like me, you have made it illegal. Because some people, you English-speaking guys, think that this is how it should be. I need fire safety, I need food safety, I need this, that, and the
Yeah.
other. And you're basically hammered me.
Premature imitation.
Premature imitation. So you're not, that education level, that understanding is not there.
Yeah.
Whereas that understanding exists in the US.
A
That
former
understanding
guest,
exists in the UK.
former guest Shruti Rajgopalan.
Yeah.
She's written a paper on this actually. India's flailing state and premature imitation.
Right.
Yeah. Because, and like you said, it's our elites that look around the world,
Yeah.
find these ideas that seem like good things to them, and then they want to impose those things on everybody. And actually, they are completely inappropriate for our level of income and our level of development.
So that's one. That's the third chapter, which is sort of more decolonizing. Is that I also got things slightly more sophisticated, slightly more loyally issues like, should you move from common law to civil law?
Right.
It'll then become a slightly detailed one, and lots of people don't like it because it's slightly more abstract and people become slightly uncertain in terms of how it will play out. But all that you need to think in terms of is Europe runs on civil law. Japan runs on civil law. They function perfectly.
No, they don't. But
I mean, perfectly in the sense they are not doing badly. It's not disaster.
Sure.
The law is functioning reasonably well. Sure. I mean, that way the US also, the law is not functioning perfectly. So the difference when you're doing, it's a comparative.
Yeah.
I make the point for civil law on the basis that actually your population has a civil law mindset. It does not have a common law mindset. Look at what your common people want and look at it from that perspective. And therefore bring that thought process. So that's the second. I then talk in terms of constitutional reform. Here I'm talking more consistency, improving quality, judicial, the performance review of judges, etc. How do you appoint judges? This is slightly more tricky politically.
Yeah.
In various ways.
Not politically, but more institutionally, right? Like
institutionally,
I don't know how we would implement something like that.
You do constitutional reform. You're amending the constitution left, right, center. Right. Article 370 you could happily scrap without an amendment. If you have the will, you can do it. You must be able to stay with your will. Once it runs into some degree of opposition, you don't run away from it. So if you stay with your will, you will bring about that sort of reform. And this requires people that are not necessarily looking at an immediate political outcome. So it requires some degree of longer thinking, deeper thinking. And it's not coalition governments have a problem. Inherently, it's hard for them to do things like that.
Right.
And my last chapter is sort of slightly out of the box ideas. So you could put it in terms of my frustration with how India works and look at how it works in various other countries. A lot of it deals with how bureaucrats and courts react to us as citizens.
Right.
What can you change over there? So whether you take out sovereign immunity or not for them. So that's one kind of issue. I've got issues in terms of how do you look at women empowerment? And I've got a very counterintuitive approach to women empowerment. How do you look at individual security? And again, I've got a very different sort of approach.
Yeah.
Lot of this chapter is meant to be more thought-provoking. I mean, my entire book is meant to actually trigger thinking. My thinking is, today, a lot of our imagination around what will require for economy to move is within everybody functions within 4 walls, and it is safe because 10 other people have spoken of those 4 walls.
Right.
I'm saying, don't think that you have to operate only within those 4 walls. Think outside of it.
Yeah.
You don't like an idea, have an informed view of why you don't like the idea. But I think that initially, while you might not like the idea, in 10 to 15 years, you will dawn upon the truth of that idea. Everybody will. But you need to start thinking. And if you don't dawn upon it, trash it.
Sure.
It needs to have, almost all my thought is in terms of what will work for the people.
Yeah.
What will work for the people is what will work for the people from an economic perspective. Because I think a wealthy nation has a certain kind of justice that it delivers in itself. So it is justice delivery, but how do you make it a fairer place? And once you're wealthy...
Maybe it's the other way around. A justice delivering nation becomes wealthy.
Also.
Yeah.
So that's why it's saying fix some of this so that you can become a wealthier nation. And then you have a certain kind of social justice that starts coming into existence. Yeah. It's not just court-driven or legal justice.
So thanks, right? Like I think you've laid out, like I said, very wide-ranging book, right? There are some pieces of your book that I really like, and there are some pieces that, like you were saying, some of those ideas I have.
You're not comfortable.
Yeah, no. I'm not. It's not even that I'm comfortable with. I don't know if they will achieve what you would want them to achieve, right? So I want to discuss both with you because I think both are important, right? So the powerful stuff first, but there's a lot less discussion there because then we are agreeing with each other, right? So, but I do want to bring it up first because I think this is a very important piece of the book, right? One is this incentive alignment, right? How do you fix the incentives of the people that are stakeholders in the justice system, right? And I think you have fantastic ideas. And to me, those are, I mean, I'm an economist, so those are understandably the most powerful levers in the book, right? So you fix incentives for people who are litigating or taking issues to the court system without being in the right. Yeah. So, like you said, for breach of contract, you recommend higher damages. You also recommend somewhere costs to be borne by the loser, right? Which again, I think is something that just sounds so natural, but why is it not happening? You recommend, and you didn't talk about that, but I think that's also a fantastic recommendation. You recommend lawyer fees to be contingent on success, right? Or at least large components of that. And again, I think that incentivizes people to try and get stuff done faster. If you're not being paid by the hour, but for succeeding, then it's in your interest to make sure that instead of just getting a stay, instead of things dragging out forever, you actually wrap things up quickly. And then you do talk about judges as well, but that's in your more complex, more difficult aspect, right? And I think that's actually the most important but most difficult piece, right? And that ties into my next discussion with you, right? You're quite techno-optimist, right? Like you have a big section on technology. I myself am relatively less technologically optimistic around the potential of technology to fix government. I'll give you an example of why, right? I think it can be all summed up by saying technology is a tool, right? If your goal is to dig a hole, right, a shovel can help you do it faster. If your goal is to sit around and pretend to dig a hole, you can take a shovel and sit with it, the hole will not get dug any faster, right? So that's largely where I'm coming from. So if you see, for instance, the bureaucracy, step away from the judiciary, I know the bureaucracy better. There have been attempts to introduce technology into the bureaucracy for decades now, right? The NIC came up with this thing called the e-filing system. And all the technology optimists had the same concept that, oh, we'll get everything onto technology, it'll give us perfect transparency, it'll do away with all of these issues, everything will be visible to everyone, things will move much faster, no files will get lost. The irony is, it's 2025 today. I think exactly one ministry in India runs on the e-file system. Maybe it has, this was true a few years ago, it could have gone either way. Maybe there's a couple more. Maybe that ministry has now stopped running on the e-file system because the secretary has changed. And I think where I'm coming from is that the reasons why some of these things are broken are not because people don't have the right tools. It's much deeper than that, right? It's much more about incentives, much more about culture, much more that, like you said, they make use of the fact that these court cases are running on forever to get benefits for themselves and or etc., right? So I'm not as optimistic about technology fixing it. But I want to hear your response to this, right? I want you to tell me why I'm wrong, because I could be wrong, right?
So I didn't think of what you just described to me, but as you were speaking, I was thinking how it will work in this system. So I think the one principal difference that I see from the bureaucracy generally is the bureaucracy and its functioning is opaque in nature. The court system is open court. It's there for everybody to see. That's one element of it. So it's harder to hide behind opacity and make something dysfunctional once you implement. The other is, so technology comes in various colors and various flavors. So I'll speak in terms of each one of those.
Yeah, I think so. Some of the pieces on technology are quite like the virtual courts thing.
So virtual courts already tried and tested and very easy to do. Now I talk about why it works. I talk about a BPO-like database system that supports judges. Judges, basically, these are lawyers who've been lawyers for a while, have become judges. They're wanting to do stuff and they're wanting to do as good as they can. A lot of our failing qualitatively in the judiciary is on account of the poor quality of lawyers and the not so good quality of the judges in terms of appreciation, etc. But if you have a know-how system that backs you, I also think in terms of when I say quality, it's also availability of the knowledge. Very often, we guys sitting in Delhi and the big cities in Bombay, etc., thinking Supreme Court and High Court. Most of justice in our country is delivered in the lower courts in rural, semi-urban India. They have very little in terms of a legal library. They have very little in terms of fallback on know-how. The lack of know-how results in poor lawyering or lawyering getting pulled into one or two people who are the better lawyers in those cities or towns. Everybody else is very, very mediocre. It warps the system. So one of my things that I do is to talk in terms of make this know-how freely available. So think in terms of Google search or something like that makes know-how very easily available. Nobody will resist it because helping make your life easier. So it's like saying that I have the option of sitting in a very cold room in Delhi and not switching on the heater or switching on the heater. I have my personal, I don't need a financial incentive to switch on the heater. It's very cold, I'm freezing. So I'll switch it on because I want to warm. You will use that know-how, one, because it makes you much better as a professional. Also, those who don't use it come with poorer work product. So there is a natural human desire to do better with whatever you're doing. And if you can make it easy for you to do it, you will do it. You don't need. Now, when we think in terms of, talk in terms of law firms, etc. So large law firms, people use technology. Technologies are hard to use. It doesn't matter what sort of mandate comes from senior management, does not get used. It doesn't matter how much senior management spent on the technology. Technology that is easy to use, everybody goes for it. So it depends when I say know-how system, how do you make it easy? Human desire, laziness, desire to make things easier in life will drive you to use that.
Right.
So that is fail-safe.
Yeah.
The same is the desire when I talk in terms of artificial intelligence. Is that AI in the early days and for a very long time until it is stable and have enough confidence to sort of completely source to AI, it is principally meant to support you. Like ChatGPT. I mean, how many people... ChatGPT doesn't give us money to use ChatGPT. We use it because it makes our life easier.
Right.
You will use the AI systems because judges will use the AI systems, lawyers will use the AI systems because it just makes our life easier. When we do this reform, you always have to be thinking in terms of, is it going to make the user's life easier or are you going to try and do it as an imposition? Anytime you think of it in terms of an imposition, it is not going to work. If it makes life easy for me, it will work. Now, importantly, like in any large organization, when you bring in new technology, how do people use that technology? Remember that many of us are old fogies. We don't want to learn new things. How do you teach me? How do you help? And I don't, just sitting in one class, I will not learn. I need constantly somebody to tell me, I'll say, oh, how does this work? This is not working for me. There must be some assistance. You have to think through that system in terms of how do you make it work. And you will find the technology will work because one, it is easy to use. I have fallback in terms of there's somebody to help me use it, understand it, make it. And once I start using it, there is no way that I'll go back to something in the past. I don't know anybody who uses typewriters and cyclostyling anymore. as soon as we become comfortable with dictation, keyboards will go out of fashion. Nobody needs to mandate it. The same is my approach to when I use technology in courtrooms. It requires no other incentive other than you'll make my life easier, I'll become more productive. I'll become cooler. I'll become a hero in the eyes of society.
But this is my worry, right? That the courtroom has no interest in being more productive.
It does. So think in terms. So there is something that does not work. Okay. All right, let me give you an example. I'll give you a slightly different example. I'm going on a street. It's littered, dirty. I have no problem taking a wrapper and throwing it on the street. I see a sparkling, clean street. In my own head, it is easy to throw the wrapper, but I'll now look for a dustbin to throw the wrapper. That's how human behavior works inherently. We understand. You think there'll be some jokers who will still throw the wrapper regardless. But a large section of the population will say, all right, I will not throw the wrapper here, I'll throw it somewhere else. That's how Indore works, and that's how some of the other city works. That's the imperative that I'm talking about, is that once it is easy to use and once you start using it and it makes life easier, people start adopting it. And those who don't use it will be seen as outliers. So unlike, now, I'll take a guess for why it failed in the bureaucracy. Like many tech tools that we apply in law firms, they're very hard to use. Some clown up there thinks that it is very easy to use because he's sort of tech savvy, but for the rest of us, it's misery. So I now look to find opportunities not to use it, and I find innovative answers to give you why I'm not using it. I'll tell you it fails here, it fails there. I'll point to 10 failures, and then finally you'll also give up. So this approach where we say that the headmaster approach will not work when it comes to use of technology. If you make life easy for the bureaucrats, I am fairly certain that it will work, including in the bureaucracy, because it makes life easy.
So you're the optimist, I'm the cynic.
So I'm the optimist. Now what happens is when it doesn't work, reason why I gave that road example, is that a system that is dysfunctional and is making my life miserable, I'll then slide further. Out of 100 cases, I'm able to deal with 20 if I make a huge effort. I still see 80 I'm not dealt with. That's a large burden.
Yeah.
What difference does it make if it's 80 or 90? I'll go on a holiday. 90 else. Yeah. So that's kind of what, it's self-defeating. So it gives you the illusion that you have a solution, but actually it is no solution because it's very hard for me to use. And it's not bringing down my despair as the service provider, as the bureaucrat is not helping it. The other element, and again, my book doesn't talk about corruption, but when you have a dysfunctional system like this, it also allows me to make money on the side.
Right.
So I use it, I come up with some excuse, I make some money.
Exactly.
There will always be people, regardless of what kind of system you put in place, you will find an innovative way of making money.
Yeah.
So I don't deal with that as a separate chapter in terms of how do you deal with corruption. But just make it easier for people to live their lives, to do their jobs. They will go for it.
Yeah. No, and of course, pairing correction of incentives with technology will be much more effective than correcting the incentives themselves. Yeah. I think my take is, without correcting the incentives, technology, in my view,
So my book also has an incentive.
Exactly, it does. Exactly.
So I use the technology and there is the incentive as well.
So I think read this as me giving you my list of priority reforms. Right? Absolutely. So I think incentives to me are super powerful in your book, and I love the fact that they're in there. One other thing that I really like in the book, which you've spoken less about, is the cultural aspects, right? Because in many systems where hard incentives don't exist, culture is what provides the incentive, right? Do you see the person in front of you as your peer, as your equal, as a citizen in equal standing as yourself? And you've spoken a lot about this. Tell us more, because I think that's also very, very important.
So can you just elaborate on the question? Is
So on culture, right? So you talk about how there is this milord kind of aspect to courts, right? And how judges and lawyers are separate from the people that are seeking justice. And when you see yourself as not sharing the other person's life and their travails, you automatically get insulated from how it's going to affect them, right? And that's part of how the incentives break down, because that culture is not there.
That's so true. So there actually, reason why I asked you for the clarification, there are two aspects of culture that I come at. One is when the law begins to work, how does business culture change?
Right.
In the sense that how do I become more truthful? When I tell you that I'll do something in 2 days, I mean 2 days.
Of course.
As against today, if I tell you something in 2 days, I'll try to do it in 2 days. It may happen in 10.
Right.
Sometimes it is, I'll start doing it on third day. So that is one part of what happens in our culture. And we put it as chalta-hai attitude, which will fix itself. The court culture. See, the court culture is clearly in the realm, sits squarely within the decolonization framework. Is that we have, and when we talk decolonization, we are talking 18th century Victorian England. There's a manner in which the courts and the lawyers worked. Today's England is very different, and today's America is very different. They have changed with the times. We have stuck to what we have got from them in the 18th century. And that is our tragedy. It is very similar to, you look at, let's say I'm talking culture. You look at the French people that live in Canada, in Quebec. Or you look at the Indians that live in Bihar. The Biharis that live in Africa.
Correct.
Their language is 2 centuries old.
They get stuck in time.
They're stuck in time. The Bihari in India has changed. Their language has changed, the culture has changed, various things have changed. But those poor fellows are stuck in that time. I suspect it is the same with us. That the English have changed, the Americans have changed, the Australians have changed, but we are stuck in time. And so that is the unwinding. So I sort of put it broadly in the category of, we have this whole approach of sovereignty, is that I'm above the law. Almost like saying I'm above the law. A Supreme Court judge I used to like a fair bit because he's very forthright. He used to say that above me there is only God. Now, you also have the safety net of saying that I cannot be removed easily. Unless something drastic is found and I'm impeached, and you can look at how much impeachment has succeeded in India. I am untouchable. So the sense that you're untouchable, that sense that you're untouchable allows you so much flexibility, and there is no restriction on what you can or cannot do. All this comes from an 18th century sort of mindset. I'm not saying that this element has gone away in the US or the UK, but along with this comes dress code. Along with this comes this milord bit. So I'll give you what happens on account of some of this culture. Is that we have 44, 45 degrees temperature here. We are still running around in the Supreme Court in gowns and black jackets. Black gowns and black jackets. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Everybody comments on it. Nobody has the courage to change it. There is an old Supreme Court Association bar resolution that says that you will no longer address judges as my lord or your lordship. You will call them sir or your honor. I can promise you it's only some lawyer that comes from some trial court that uses sir or your honor in the Supreme Court and gets castigated every time it happens. So some judge will shout at him that you are not from this court. And there is no regular practitioner in the Supreme Court or the High Court that uses sir or your honor, because you have to remember that, one, our judges are very hardworking. They are grossly underpaid. So the only thing that they actually have is an ego boost that comes from their position, the status in society, the way you speak with me. It is an important element of my career that I see. Professionally, what is it that I'm doing? What am I getting in return? Because you're treating me like a dog when it comes to work, and you're paying me like a donkey. I don't mean disrespect for any of them. I think I have huge respect that they're actually doing it like that. But then they have this need to say that at least give me something in return. The problem with that mix is that they have a lot of discretionary power. So in certain cases, they can grant injunctions, they can word orders in a particular fashion. Every lawyer is trying to endear himself to a judge. Now, if calling you my lord puts me in a slightly better position than calling you sir, I will use my lord every time. That then results in a change of behavior in terms of how I speak in court, the kind of language that I use in court. I use the archaic language, whereas modern business language is very different. As a result, people will say, I don't understand lawyers' language what you use in court orally is the way you write. It is very difficult to understand. Everything is a prayer. We think of a judge as a king or a lord or somebody who's superior to you. A judge is not seen as a service provider.
Yeah.
Actually, why is a judge not a service provider? So my approach in this is pay the judges much better.
Yeah.
Use technology, reduce their workload, and get rid of all this false facade of drama bazi, etc. Make what happens in court easier for people to understand.
Yeah.
Because that you are meant for them.
Yeah.
You are not the English. The English had no interest in letting the Indians understand what they were doing.
Yeah.
But you are Indians. I mean, behave like Indians.
I think this whole analogy of being stuck in time because you're not a living, connected institution is sort of tying back to where you started, right? That the law has become disconnected from the common citizen. Justice has become disconnected from the common citizen. It does not reflect who we are and what we are. It is not connected to who we are and what we are. And I think that's an incredibly powerful insight. It's all over your book. Thank you so much, Anand. Pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rahul.
Awesome. Thank you.